Tonight, I wanted to talk about what I'm calling changing our relationship with ourselves. So, I talk a lot about loving ourselves and showing ourselves love, treating ourselves with love. But depending on the life we've had, the idea of loving ourselves can seem impossible, perhaps. So, depending on the experiences you've had in life, the wounds you've survived, the trauma you've survived, or maybe just the messages you received from your parents, from your family, from your peers, from teachers, from coworkers, from jobs. Depending on all of that, we might be at a place where it's really difficult to love ourselves based on the conditioning that we've received from all of our experiences and the messages we received growing up. And so trying to go from where we are right now to loving ourselves, that may seem like an impossible jump. It may seem like some Herculean task to go from where we are now to loving ourselves. And so we can, instead of just trying to make that epic jump, we can think about breaking it up in stages. And because I was thinking about this, and actually I went through a stage first where I just worked on accepting myself. I mean, it wasn't a conscious thing I was trying to do, but when I moved to Costa Rica and the small villages I lived in, with a lot of expats, those small communities I lived in were just very open, welcoming, accepting communities. And it was while I was living there that I really started to accept myself more. And to not love myself. That's where I just first started to accept myself, because the people around me just accepted me how I was. And in those communities, what it meant fitting in meant being yourself. If you were just being yourself, then people accepted you. Or even really, no matter what was going on with you, people were just very open and welcoming and accepting. And so that's where I really started to learn to accept myself as I was. And then when I went to the yoga teacher training with MC Yogi and his wife Amanda, so at that point I really started to accept myself. And then at that yoga teacher training with all those beautiful, amazing souls, that's where I started to really fully love myself then. So I'd already kind of done the work to accept myself. And then after I accepted myself, then when I was in that loving environment, I was able to really love myself. And then I had another experience with loving myself at the breathwork retreat I went to in near Denver. And so I realized without kind of planning it, I went through this progression of working towards loving myself. And it started with just accepting myself. And so we've done, in the past, we've done the exercise where we tell ourselves, I love you, put our hands in our heart, or look in a mirror and tell ourselves, say the words, I love you to ourselves. And I've talked before about how that can feel inauthentic, and that's okay because we're trying to reprogram our brains. So at first, that the idea of loving ourselves can seem foreign to our program, foreign to our conditioning, foreign to our subconscious. And so we need to go through a process of reconditioning the subconscious, reconditioning the brain to love ourselves. But we can go through a couple steps on the way to love. And a couple steps along the way can be first just accepting ourselves. And then after we accept ourselves, then being grateful for ourselves. And then after we're gotten to the point where we're grateful for ourselves, then we can maybe start thinking about actually loving ourselves. And so that's a way to kind of work up to loving ourselves, going from if we're starting in a point where we don't love ourselves and it's a struggle to love ourselves. And maybe if we're at a point where the idea of loving ourselves is totally foreign, then we don't have to jump right into, we can work our way up towards loving ourselves. And so, like I said, a first step along that path can be just starting to accept ourselves. So we've done the practice of giving ourselves love, and we can, so instead of trying to love ourselves, we can work on just accepting ourselves. And so a way to work this into our lives, so if you have a daily meditation practice, maybe at the end of that practice, you just spend a minute, just 1 minute, closing your eyes, closing your eyes or open your eyes, just spend a minute saying to yourself, instead of jumping into I love you, you can just start off saying I accept you. So you can, or you can also try this in front of a mirror, looking yourself in the eye and saying to yourself, I accept you. So that's always kind of the ultimate test of how you feel about yourself, is when you look yourself in the mirror and look yourself in the eye, make eye contact with yourself. And if you can say, I love you while looking yourself in the eyes, then you've got a pretty loving relationship with yourself. But if that's a struggle, then maybe just try to look yourself in the eyes and say, I'm grateful for you. And if that's still a struggle, then maybe just look yourself in the eyes and say, I accept you. And if that's still a struggle, then you can try looking yourself in the eye and saying, I wish I could accept you. Because that's probably or maybe for, depending on where you are in your journey, that may be a more truthful statement than trying to say, I accept you. So, I mean, I know for a long time, I didn't accept myself. And trying to say, if we try to, when we try to make these statements to change our opinion of ourselves, when they're not true, they can make it can cause this cognitive dissonance, and it can make it feels false, feels inauthentic to say. And so a very early starting point can be just wishing to accept ourselves. So that can be where we start off. So maybe we start off with a daily practice after we meditate, just spending a minute saying out loud, I wish I accept you, or I wish I accepted you. And so we can just try that for a while. Just because when we say that, even just that statement of I wish I accept you, that's starting to reprogram the brain, reprogram the subconscious towards a state of acceptance, right? It's starting to bring that idea of self-acceptance into the subconscious. And another way to think of it, just even saying those words out loud brings the vibration of self-acceptance into our physical reality, just saying those words out loud. And over time, if we say that to ourselves more and more, it starts reprogramming the subconscious to actually start to believe it. So when we start off saying, I wish I accept you, over time, the subconscious is going to start becoming familiar with the concept of accepting ourselves. And that idea of accepting ourselves is going to start to blossom within the subconscious. So after a while of saying to ourselves, I wish I accept you, and maybe after a while of doing that, you can try saying, I accept you. And then maybe at this point, it no longer feels so foreign, no longer feels so inauthentic to say, I accept you. And so this is how we can progressively work our way up from wherever we are right now towards loving ourselves. So we can start with just wishing to accept ourselves, and then moving to accepting ourselves, and then maybe wishing to be grateful for ourselves. And that can lead to actually being grateful for ourselves, and then maybe wishing to love ourselves. And then after we spend a while wishing to love ourselves and reprogramming the brain so that the idea of loving ourselves is no longer foreign, then over time we can come to actually love ourselves.